Before diving into this incredible story, remember to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, every story has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. The rain was beating against the large windows of the First National Bank of New York. Inside, everything exuded luxury, the polished white marble, the gilding on the columns, and the expensive perfume of wealthy clients. Behind the main counter, Robert Wilson, the branch manager, straightened his blue tie and cast a disdainful glance toward the front door. He loved the quiet power he wielded here, in his kingdom. The glass doors opened, letting in a gust of wind and a young woman in a beige coat soaked by the rain. Her dark skin contrasted with the brightness of the immaculate walls. She walked calmly, straight, with a grace that belonged only to those who knew where they came from. Robert frowned. "Can I help you?" he asked in a curt tone, without even hiding his annoyance. "Yes, I'm here to open a business account." "Here are my documents," she replied politely, handing over a thick file. He took it with his fingertips, as if the mere touch bothered him. "Professional, really? Where do you work?" "I run my own company," she replied calmly. Robert gave a mocking smile. "Oh, interesting. A company? And in what field? Housekeeping? Catering?" The employees behind him exchanged amused glances. She remained silent, but her gaze remained fixed on him, proud and calm. Robert absently flipped through the papers. Suddenly, he came across the gold logo, Miller Holdings, one of the most powerful investment conglomerates in the country. But instead of paying attention, he burst out laughing. "Miller Holdings, seriously? You think we're going to believe you work for them?" Then, in a whisper he thought was discreet, he blurted out, "Dirty black slave." Time stood still. The word had just passed her lips, heavy as a slap. An icy silence fell over the hall. Even the keyboard stopped typing. The young woman took a deep breath, calmly put away her papers, and replied in a composed voice. "I see. Thank you for your welcome. I will come back." She turned on her heel and left with dignity, under the embarrassed stares of the employees. Robert, for his part, felt triumphant. For him, she was just another woman to put in her place. But what he didn't know. The reason was that Naomi Miller, the woman he had just humiliated, was none other than the new owner of the banking group after a merger signed the day before on Wall Street. The next day, she would return. Not as a customer, but like her direct superior, ready to make her taste the bitterest lesson of her life. The next morning, the sun filtered through the large windows of the bank. Robert Wilson, dressed in his impeccable gray suit, arrived as usual, with the confident stride of someone who believes himself untouchable. He greeted the employees distractedly, ignoring their murmurs. Some still had the previous day's scene in mind. But Robert felt no remorse. "These people need to understand that this isn't the street," that he muttered as he settled into his office. A few minutes later, a message arrived in his internal inbox. "Emergency meeting at 9 a.m. All managers must be present. New group leadership to be presented." Robert shrugged. Just another one of those pointless changes, he thought. He had no idea that this meeting would seal his downfall. At precisely 9 o'clock, the conference room was full. The executives, in suits, were whispering nervously. In the center, the CEO of the banking group, Mr. Anderson, was talking with an elegant woman in a white suit, standing near the window. When Robert entered, he froze. It was her. The woman of yesterday. The one he had humiliated. His heart began to pound. He looked for a seat, avoiding her gaze. The CEO spoke in a cheerful voice. "Ladies and gentlemen, I am pleased to introduce the new majority owner of First National Bank, Dr. Naomi Miller, president of Miller Holdings. She will now lead our group following the merger signed yesterday on Wall Street." A murmur rippled through the room. Robert felt the ground give way beneath his feet. He no longer understood. "Owner." Naomi walked calmly towards the center of the room. Her gaze met his. "Some of you here already know me," she said in a calm voice. A slight smile touched her lips. Yesterday, I received a special welcome. All eyes turned towards Robert. He turned as pale as chalk. But I'm not here to talk about the past, Naomi continues, that I am here to talk about the future. A future where respect will not be an option, but a rule. Her voice was soft, but every word landed like a slap. Robert felt his throat tighten. The CEO, confused, didn't understand what was happening. When the meeting ended, Naomi slowly walked towards him. "Mr. Wilson," she said calmly, "I believe we already met yesterday." He stammered, unable to meet her gaze. I didn't know who you were, madam. I am sincerely sorry if I said anything inappropriate." Naomi stared at him for a long time, without any apparent anger. "What you said yesterday didn't hurt me, Mr. Wilson. It simply reminded me why I do what I do. Because there are still many people to educate, even in the most luxurious places." Then she turned on her heel and left the room, leaving him alone, ashamed, with a blank stare. For the first time in a long time, Robert Wilson no longer felt powerful. He felt small, naked before the truth. And he knew that from that day on, his world had just turned upside down. The following Monday, the atmosphere at the First National Bank had changed. The employees walked straight, spoke in hushed voices. The name of Dr. Naomi Miller echoed in every office like that of a silent legend. Robert Wilson, on the other hand, was living in inner hell. He avoided eye contact and conversations. Every time he passed Naomi in a corridor, his heart raced, and he felt shame overwhelm him. But Naomi had not tried to send him away. Non. She had a much smarter, and much more painful, method. A few days later, she summoned all the staff for a strategic meeting. The executives were seated around a large glass table, the bank's logo shining beneath their elbows. Naomi stood tall, confident, with a natural aura of authority. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began calmly, "for years, this bank has prospered, but not always with respect and fairness. Some applications were rejected not because of the figures, but because of the applicant's skin color or name." A murmur rippled through the room. Naomi then pulled out a black folder. "I requested a full audit of the last 10 years. Here are the results." The pages appeared on the screen, precise statistics, names, unjustified refusals. And amidst the numbers, one name kept coming up. Robert Wilson. Naomi looked up. "Mr. Wilson, could you explain why these 37 loan applications from African American entrepreneurs were rejected without economic justification?" Robert swallowed with difficulty. I was following the procedures, the files were incomplete," he stammered. "Really?" she replied calmly. "So how do you explain that the same files, reviewed again this week, were accepted by the committee?" Silence. All that could be heard was the ticking of a wall clock. Naomi closed the file, placed her hands on the table, and said in a firm voice, "It's not just about money, Mr. Wilson. It's about the soul. You turned down dreams, not numbers." She then turned to the others. "From today, the bank will adopt a new policy: total transparency, mandatory diversity training, and the creation of a support fund for entrepreneurs from minority backgrounds." The employees applauded softly. Robert, for his part, lowered his head. He felt exposed, judged, but above all, hurt. In the following days, Naomi put her plan into action. She asked Robert to personally oversee the new inclusion programs. He now had to work with those he once despised: young black executives, Latino employees, women from modest backgrounds. It was a real ordeal for him. Every day, he saw in their eyes what he had been, a man blinded by his pride. Naomi, for her part, observed without humiliating him. She wanted him to understand for himself. She knew that true revenge lies not in destruction, but in transformation. One evening, when everyone had left the bank, Robert timidly knocked on Naomi's office door. She was still working, focused on a file. "Dr. Miller, may I speak with you?" he asked in a low voice. She raised her head, her gaze calm. I'm listening to you. I don't understand why you didn't fire me. I was monstrous to you. And yet, you let me stay. Naomi put down her pen, then replied. Because people don't change when they are destroyed, Mr. Wilson. They change when they see themselves as they truly are. His words pierced him. He felt a tear rise, which he immediately swallowed. I want to change, he murmured. Naomi gave a slight smile. So start tomorrow. You'll be training new recruits on banking ethics. That's your area of expertise, isn't it? He nodded, moved, before slowly leaving. For the first time, Robert Wilson understood that the greatest punishment was being forced to look at one's own ignorance, even to the point of being ashamed of it. Weeks passed. Under the leadership of Dr. Naomi Miller, the bank was gradually changing. Employees felt freer and more respected. Customers, once ignored, returned with confidence. And at the heart of this transformation, Robert Wilson was fighting an inner battle he had never fought before, that of his conscience. Every morning, he got up earlier, no longer to impress, but to learn. He reread the files he had rejected, noted his mistakes, and tried to understand the reasons behind his prejudices. But the further he went, the more he discovered the ugliness of what he had been. One day, while sorting through old documents, he came across a file marked, rejected, not viable. The name inscribed on the ice, Marcus Johnson. A young black entrepreneur whom he had publicly humiliated 3 years earlier. Marcus had asked for a loan to open a mechanic's shop. Robert still remembered it. He had made him wait 2 hours before coldly telling him, "Banks are not for dreamers like you." But what he didn't know was that Marcus hadn't given up. Thanks to a microloan obtained elsewhere, he had opened his garage, now one of the most successful in Brooklyn. Robert felt a burning shame rise in his throat. That night, he did not sleep. He remained seated in his living room, his hands clasped, reliving each face he had despised. The next day, he made a decision. He left his office and went to the garage, Johnson Motors, and waited for Marcus to finish with a client. When he looked up, he was stunned. "Mr. Wilson? You here?" "Yes," Robert replied in a trembling voice, "that I came to apologize. For the way I treated you." Marcus stared at him for a long time. "You made me lose all hope that day," he said calmly, "but perhaps it was necessary. I realized that I didn't need anyone's approval to succeed." Robert nodded, his eyes moist. "Thank you, for succeeding despite myself." That day, as he left the garage, he felt different. As if a stone had just slipped from his heart. Back at the bank, he found Naomi in the conference room. She was still working, surrounded by documents. He knocked softly on the door. "Dr. Miller?" "Come in, Mr. Wilson." He approached slowly. "I went to see a man I had hurt. I saw what I could have destroyed. And I think I finally understood the consequences of my actions." Naomi took off her glasses and looked at him with unexpected tenderness. "You know, Robert, real change is not measured by your apologies, but by what you do with what you have just understood." He nodded, deeply moved. "I no longer want to be the man I used to be." She smiled slightly. "So don't be like that anymore. Help me build something better here. Not for me, but for those you've excluded." It was that evening that a strange alliance was born between them. That of a former executioner seeking redemption, and of a woman who still believed in the possibility of forgiveness. 6 months had passed since Dr. Naomi Miller took over as head of the First National Bank of New York. The transformation was spectacular. The once icy corridors now breathed goodwill and cooperation. Employees greeted each other, customers from all backgrounds entered with confidence, and the bank, for the first time in decades, had become a symbol of equality and modernity. At the center of this metamorphosis, one man had changed more than all the others, Robert Wilson. His arrogance had disappeared. His haughty gaze had given way to genuine humility. He worked tirelessly, helping new employees, mentoring young entrepreneurs he would once have rejected. But despite all this, he knew that he still had a moral debt that no effort could erase, the one he owed to Naomi. That morning, a solemn ceremony was held in the bank's main hall. Journalists, clients, and government representatives were present. Naomi was to present a new solidarity loan program, inspired by her own values, the Hope Fund, intended for entrepreneurs from disadvantaged backgrounds. Robert, standing back, observed the scene, his heart pounding. He knew that it was the culmination of everything she had built, and living proof that one could lead with dignity, without hatred. Naomi stepped onto the platform. The cameras lit up, the whispers died away. "When I arrived here," she began, "I didn't just want to run a bank. I wanted to restore meaning to the word, justice." His gaze swept across the room, before settling on Robert at the back. "I have met people who have made mistakes. Serious mistakes. But I have also learned that hatred is not erased by punishment, it is healed by understanding and change." A brief silence. Then she added, "Some had the courage to question themselves. And today, they are among those who are rebuilding this institution with humanity." All eyes followed the direction of her gaze. Robert felt a shiver run through him. She was talking about him. Naomi made a discreet sign. "Mr. Wilson, would you like to join us?" A murmur rippled through the audience. Robert stood up slowly, hesitantly. His hands trembled slightly. He walked up to the stage, under the flashes of the cameras. Naomi handed him the microphone. "I think you have something to say." He looked at her for a moment, searching for his words. Then he spoke, his voice trembling but sincere. "For a long time, I believed that my position, my clothes, and the color of my skin gave me value. I was wrong. What I discovered is that true dignity comes from respect. I hurt people. And I will always remember that. But thanks to you, Dr. Miller, I understood that it's never too late to change." A profound silence followed his speech. Then, slowly, the audience began to applaud. Some employees were crying. Naomi gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "Humility is man's greatest victory, Robert." The two looked at each other for a moment, without resentment, without superiority. Just two human beings who went through the worst to reach the best. A few weeks later, Naomi announced her temporary departure to open an educational foundation in Africa. Before leaving, she left a note on Robert's desk. "The wounds of the past never disappear. But if you turn your shame into a light, it will guide others towards change. Naomi." Robert read these words in silence, a discreet smile on his lips. He looked up at the bank's large glass roof, where the morning light filtered in softly. The man he had been was dead. But the person he was becoming had only just been born.